Good evening. My name is Ronald Joseph Lin, and you are now watching Real Talk with Ronnie. Welcome back to our show. Earlier this week, I had the honor and pleasure of sitting down with Bridget Kelly, the Republican candidate for Bergen County Clerk. Bridget and I, along with Bob Kugler, Simone Zagonis, and Tim Walsh, will be running on the same county slate this year, and I could not be more excited or more proud of these fine and distinguished individuals. Together, we will bring prosperity, hope, and accountability back to county government. But this week, Real Talk was especially excited to have a one-on-one with Bridget. Bridget Kelly has been in the media eye for quite some time now due to her supposed role in the quote-unquote Bridgegate scandal that haunted much of the latter half of the Chris Christie administration. However, although Bridget was initially blamed and scapegoated for the events commonly known as Bridgegate and faced prison time, she was thankfully, rightfully, and completely vindicated when the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously overturned her conviction in May of last year. Now that she's back and stronger than ever, Bridget hopes to bring her passion and commitment for public service back to government by becoming Bergen County's next county clerk. Personally speaking, I am proud and honored to have Bridget run for Bergen County Clerk, and I'm ecstatic that I have the remarkable opportunity to run on the same ticket with her this fall. Bridget has literally walked through fire, and because of her ordeal, I am confident that there is nothing she cannot handle, and there is no obstacle too big for her. Bridget will help lead our entire team to victory this November, and I can't wait to see her do what she does best, which is to serve the fine citizens of Bergen County. That's what she was born to do, and there's no one more suited for this position and redemption than Bridget Kelly. If you'd like to learn more about Bridget's campaign, please visit her campaign website at bridgetkelly.com. But for now, please enjoy my one-on-one with the indomitable Bridget Kelly. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is April 20th, 2021. You're watching Real Talk with Ronnie, and on today's show, we have the very special Bridget Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So, Bridget, thanks for joining us today. I know you've got a very busy schedule. You're running for a high office. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and what got you into politics?
Perfect. Thank you, and thank you again for
Sure.
having me. So I live in Ramsey with my 4 children. Grew up in Bergen County, grew up in Ramsey. Prior to moving to Ramsey, I was born in Englewood, New Jersey. With my parents, we moved to Demarest, New Jersey, and until I was 12 years old, we were in Demarest, and I was in the public schools in Demarest. Our family grew. My mother had my baby brother, and we moved up to Ramsey at that time, which is where I then spent my middle school years at the Catholic school in Ramsey, St. Paul's, and then I went to Immaculate Heart Academy in Washington Township, and then graduated from there and went to Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, Maryland. And after college, came back home, got married, moved to Mahwah, and then moved back to Ramsey in 2000. So that's where I've raised my children. Okay. My children have all gone to the same school that I did and that my brothers did, which is St. Paul's.
Right.
My youngest will graduate from there this year. So we've been in that school since 1983, which is a really long time.
Right, yeah.
And then my daughters went to Immaculate Heart Academy, which is where I went, and my boys. My older son graduated from Don Bosco Prep, and I have a senior that will graduate in June.
Wow.
So that's
Yes.
what brought me. That's me in Bergen County.
Yeah, that's you in a nutshell. And it's interesting to note that out of all those towns that you mentioned, they're all in Bergen County.
They are.
Literally every single one.
They
so
are.
you are, your bread and butter is Bergen County.
Listen, it's home to me. It's, there's 70 towns in Bergen County, and Bergen County is the biggest county in the state of New Jersey. Yeah. But to me, it doesn't feel that big. Some days when you're driving on the highways, it does, and you think, where is everybody coming from? But I love it here. My first internship, and really what got me into politics, you had asked that before. I would say the first time I was really interested in politics, ironically, was when I lived in Demarest. Okay. And my best friend growing up was a little girl named Nicole Cardinelli. Okay. And Nicole Cardinelli's father is our late Senator Jerry Cardinelli. Right. And Jerry had run for governor, I don't even remember what year, but he was always doing something. Right. He was mayor of Demarest at one point, and then he was the senator. And when he was the senator, he had the license plates that said senator, and I thought that was very fancy. Yeah. And I thought that was very interesting. But he used to talk about all the time about things in New Jersey that needed to be fixed. And what was funny about Jerry Cardinelli was that that's what he talked about. I mean, he'd be interested in what Nicole and I were doing if we had a lemonade stand or something, but he was always looking to fix New Jersey. So I remember thinking about that. They would take me out to their beach house in Shelter Island, and I'd think, wow, I mean, those are big problems. But I was a little girl. Right. So fast forward, I move up to Ramsey, and was always on student council and student government, and always involved in student government in high school. I get into college, and I decide I'm going to major in political science. Okay, great. So, but I go to school in Emmitsburg, Maryland, which is about an hour outside of Washington, D.C. So I was like close to that nucleus, and I knew I wanted to one day go there. Did you get a chance to intern in D.C.? I did, but before that internship, my very first internship, ironically, was in Bergen County. Okay. And it was working for former county executive Pat Schuber. Okay, yeah. And Pat Schuber had an office of, his 3 or 4 key people. And one of them was a woman named Tina Alexander, who was my idol. Oh, yeah? And Tina Alexander later married Wolfgang Albrecht, and he was in politics too and in government. But Tina's job in Pat Schuber's office was constituent services. Okay. So her job was to be in touch with constituents, and if the constituents had problems, her job was to find out how to fix them. Right. Well, I interned for Tina, and I thought that was the coolest job in the world because Jerry Cardinelli talked about all these problems. Right. Tina Alexander was helping fixing them. So, and that was just in Bergen County, and I was fascinated at the time by that. And then I applied for and got an internship down on Capitol Hill with Congresswoman Marge Rockema. Okay. The late Congresswoman Marge Rockema. She was Congresswoman in the 5th District, She was in the 5th District for many, many years. Right. And I loved it. I lived in Reston, Virginia, and I thought I was Elwoods. So you were before there Elwoods was Elwoods. I mean, you're both blonde. So, there you go. So it works out. So you were there for like the summer. Right? I was there. I was a summer intern, and I commuted every day, and I just thought I had such a rush. Yeah. And I remembered the summer before when I would drive up to the administration building and the courthouse in Hackensack. Right. When you see the gold dome, you get a chill. I'm a nerd, but I had a chill. Right. You see the Capitol, United States Capitol, and that's more than a chill. Right? You're in awe. Right. So I work for Marge, and I have a wonderful time, and I had interviewed for jobs on Capitol Hill, and I had an unfortunate car accident when I was a senior in college. I was hit by a drunk driver. Oh, sorry to hear that. And broke my pelvis. Ooh. So I had to come home to rehab. Right. Well, while I was home rehabbing, I got engaged to be married. Oh, wow. And then all of a sudden there was I hadn't graduated yet, so we were on fast forward. What am I going to do while I'm rehabbing up here in Bergen County? And a guy by the name of Assemblyman Dave Russo needed a legislative aid. Okay. So I went. In which district? Sorry. He was in District 40. Okay. So Krista Phillips replaced Assemblyman Dave Russo. And at the time, back in 1994, which is a long time ago, it was Senator Henry McNamara in District 40, Assemblyman Nick Felice, and Assemblyman Dave Russo. And District 40 looked much different than it does now. And Ramsey falls within it does District not. 40? No. Okay. Years and years ago it did, but it's District 39. Okay. So when I lived in Mahwah, which is where my ex-husband and I bought our first house, that was in District 40. Okay. But Ramsey is 39. So I went and interviewed on Good Friday with Dave Russo. And I remember I couldn't drive because I was still rehabbing.
Right.
And I was home for Easter break. And I went down to his office in Teaneck. He's an attorney in Teaneck. And I can remember what I wore, and I sat there for 2.5 hours interviewing for this job.
And it was a job for a
legislative aid.
Okay.
To me, it was like a dream come true. That's my dream job.
Well, I mean, you were friends with Jerry's family, right?
Yes.
So couldn't you have gotten Jerry to, put in a good word for you?
Well, what's funny, Ron, is that at the same time that I'm doing this, my grandmother is Jerry Cardinelli's executive secretary at the time.
Okay.
She worked until she was 89 years old
wow.
for Jerry Cardinelli for 25 years.
Wow.
She was the boss.
Yeah.
And Jerry, honestly, probably till the day, he died, would say that Rita was the boss. And everyone that knows from those days in Jerry's office, they knew Rita was the boss. She would tell you your penmanship wasn't correct. She would tell you your phone manners weren't good. She was just in charge.
And this is your grandmother on your mom's side?
My mom's side.
Okay.
So she lived in Cresskill on Madison Avenue, and then later moved to Ramsey. But anyhow, so I interviewed with Dave, and on Easter Sunday he called me and offered me the job and said, I want you on the team. I'm going to pay you X, health benefits, all this. And at the time, out of all my friends, I was one of the first people in college to get a job.
Yeah, I mean, you're not graduated yet. You
I'm
have a
not.
job already.
Right.
That's great.
So it was his office was in Midland Park, so it was a 7-minute drive.
Right.
So I graduated from college. I actually started working for Dave prior to my graduation. Worked for Dave and loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. And Dave enjoyed the reputation and still does, although he's not active anymore in politics. Just one of the kindest, nicest men in the world. He couldn't get anywhere on time, Ron, but he was the nicest man in the world.
I think that's a political trait. Well, that's a trait that many politicians have, right?
Or they develop. You might want to be punctual, but if you're, because of your schedule, as you know. So I worked for Dave for 16 years, was able to have my kids, raise my kids, and really he made it work for me.
Right.
And I got to a point where my kids were getting a little bit older, and I was active though while working for Dave on county committee.
But I got a question though. So I mean, you mentioned that you broke your pelvis. That's why you were home in Jersey, right? So if you hadn't broken your pelvis, would you have maybe tried to find a job in DC?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You probably would have worked for Marge in her district office, right?
I on the Hill probably, not in
yeah.
her district, but I would have definitely have looked to be down there in some capacity.
So I mean, breaking the pelvis might have been like a blessing in disguise. So
I
it gave
seem
you
to
the
have
chance,
a bunch of those.
Yeah, it gave you the chance to come back up to Bergen County and kind of stay close to the family and start your family, right?
You know what? I think in some ways, and that was the first major real hurdle in my life. I really do think that it kind of made me readjust my sails. I was a senior in college. It was it grounded me.
Right.
You know. And then I went to work for Dave. My second son has a heart defect, had open heart surgery the day he was born, and Dave, because he knew how much family meant, he was such a integral part of my ability to make my job work, but also be a mom for a kid that might not make it. Right. So it's interesting how my world in government and politics has kind of changed my life in so many different ways, So listen, I worked for Dave. It was great. I was the president of my Republican club in Ramsey, and there was this guy named Chris Christie running for governor in 2009, and there was an energy in the party.
How did you first get in touch? How did you guys first meet, you and Christie?
So that's what I was going to share.
Sure.
So I'm president of the Ramsey Republican Club, and I have friends that are presidents of other local clubs. We all get to know each other. So Vinny Durante from Upper Saddle River, and maybe you know his name. Okay. Vinny was the president of the Upper Saddle River Republican Club. And there was several other clubs where I knew the club president, Gary Montroy at the time, I think in Mahwah. And I said, listen, we've got 5 people running for governor. Why don't we have a joint brunch before silly season? And by silly season, I mean the convention season.
Right.
Because anyone running for governor has to compete in 21 conventions. So, and years ago, convention season, I told you this convention night, people used to hand out food.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fun. So in 2009, I thought, let's get on board. Let's make them realize and remember how important Bergen County is. So we had 5 towns host a Republican club brunch at the Ramsey Country Club in February of '09.
Do you remember which 5 towns it was?
So Oakland,
Okay.
Ramsey, Upper Saddle River, Allendale, Saddle River, and I believe Mawa. It might have been 6.
Okay.
And I probably could find the invitation.
Right, okay.
So those were the glory days.
Right.
It was such an exciting time. So we had probably about 200 people at the Ramsey Golf and Country Club in the ballroom. And these 5 candidates for governor all came. All of them.
Who were the 5, if you
So sure.
recall?
I sure do. I might leave one out.
Okay.
But Steve Lonigan.
Okay.
Richard Merck. Chris Christie. Brian Levine. And there was one other. And anyone watching, if you can think of it, let me know, because I can't remember who the 5th was.
Brian Levine is the same Brian Levine who's running for governor this year
Correct,
too, right?
yes.
Okay.
He was the mayor of Somerville Somerset, New
mayor
Jersey.
Of Franklin, I think.
Franklin, I'm
Right,
sorry,
yeah.
yes. And then he is I think he's a commissioner
Right.
in
Well, he
his
was,
county.
yeah, I think he was freeholder.
Right, commissioner. And he's running again now.
And then Steve Lonigan, he actually ran for Congress also, right?
He ran. Steve's run for a couple things.
Yeah.
I love Steve. Steve was the mayor of Bogota for years, and a fierce conservative, and a friend to Republican causes, and really somebody who, made sure we talked about things that Republicans didn't always want to talk about.
Yeah.
So Steve's a friend, and Steve has done good work for Republicans. Always.
Right.
So we had these 5 candidates come. They all spoke, and there was an energy that was just palpable, and it was so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about Chris Christie back then when he was coming up where you just kind of knew, like, this is like a special dude, right?
Yeah, I mean, how it began and ended are 2 totally different things, but I would say this, he certainly got people motivated, and he got people to want to be motivated.
Right.
And listen, his big thing was, he told it like it was, and he did up until a point. And so, there was something engaging about him. There was something, when he spoke to you, you truly believed he was only talking to you and he wasn't looking over his shoulder.
Right.
So, there was and we needed that as a state. And we in Bergen, listen, all the diehard Republicans want to feel a part of something, and this very headquarters had people in it every day.
Right.
We were dialing. My kids grew up here eating Domino's pizza and Dunkin' Donuts and whatever other garbage. Christie had staff embedded here. The Republican National Committee had staff embedded here. This place was buzzing.
Yeah.
Buzzing.
Oh, yeah. So if you guys don't know, we're actually filming this from the BCRO headquarters here in Hackensack on 339 Main Street.
Yes.
And this place has seen a lot of history, right?
It has, and I can remember the days, and then we used to use phone, we had phones,
banks, right?
Phone banks
Right.
here, but all these tables on either side, it's a huge room, were filled with phones.
I mean,
and
at
people
capacity,
dialing.
this place could probably fill, like 500 people?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a huge room, guys.
Pre-COVID.
Huge room, yeah.
But for me, I would walk in here after picking up the kids from school, and it would just be buzzing.
This was kind of like a second home to you.
It certainly was.
To, like, not just you, to many people, right, in the
It
political
was,
circles.
and I have such warm memories of so many people because we'd have Wednesdays, with the women for Christie on Wednesdays, so they'd come at lunchtime on Wednesdays and dial for Christie. So, and for me, it was all volunteer, but I really felt, after watching what was going on in the legislature for so many years and in the state working for Dave, I really felt somebody was finally here to kind of be like, no more.
Right. So that breakfast that you guys organized for the 5 candidates, was that the first time that you had like a true interaction with Chris Christie?
I believe it was, yeah.
Okay.
And that's when I met his then campaign manager, Bill Stepien. And
Who, by the way, was Trump's his campaign manager in the 2020 race, right?
Correct. He was his deputy campaign manager in 2016.
Right.
Or field director, or whatever his title was, but he was named his campaign manager in 2020.
Right.
So Bill, and listen, the campaign realized how important Bergen was.
Yeah.
So it's really, really cool to be the most popular county in the state.
Yeah.
People want to be here, and we see that with Jack Chitterelli now.
Yeah.
He knows how important Bergen is. So, as we do this, and as we, I have said many a time, I sense an excitement as I did with Christie. Unfortunately, COVID muffles a lot of that.
Yeah.
But I, like I said to Ron prior to coming on this afternoon, this place used to be bustling. And so I want that again. I want, we're not all going to be on landlines, but I want to be on our own phones. But this should be a gathering place for the party, and it should be a gathering place for Republicans. And I think we have that energy right now.
So just a quick question. So you mentioned back in 09, it was 09, right? When Christie ran. And now we know that Jack Ciattarelli's, running. So you mentioned that you feel like the similar buzz in the air, right? Like a similar excitement, right? Mm-hmm. Is it more now, or is it, how would you compare the two? I
don't know that we can compare it because of COVID.
Yeah.
I think COVID, as I said, muffles it a lot. Mm-hmm. I think that the party has changed in good ways and bad ways.
Right.
I feel that there's a youthful energy that I've never seen before, which makes me happy. But I think Jack, and I knew Jack when he was in the legislature, but as he calls it, purgatory, which it was, I just feel that he brings a real personality, if that makes sense. He's genuine. He
brings this human touch, right?
He's so genuine, and I marvel at his ability, his recollection of history. I mean, he told a story at that Lincoln Day dinner, and I could have cried with this history at Lincoln that he told, and I would have loved him for a teacher because I would have probably learned.
It was just the way that he said it, because I thought that he was reading off of something, but no, it was all from his head.
Yeah. He's impressive, but I want to say anyone can memorize, but to memorize, understand, and then be able to speak it, that's a gift.
Yeah.
But not only that, he's so concerned about New Jersey, and he's so engaged. And he's got an energy.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you something.
He is all over the place, all over.
His Wheaties in the morning, I don't know what he has, but he's tremendous, and he's just genuine. And I feel the energy because I think the state, residents of New Jersey are as cranky as they were in the Corzine years that they are now in the Murphy years.
Right. And also, I mean, not to take anything away from past GOP candidates, but you do definitely feel a difference in the air when you look at Jack Ciattarelli as opposed to maybe like a Brett Schundler or who was the other guy who ran?
Let's see, we've had a lot of people run.
Doug Forrester.
Doug Forrester,
yeah,
sure.
Sorry, but not to take anything away from those guys because they were great too. But it does feel like there's something different in the air now with Jack Ciattarelli.
Yeah,
right?
I think. Listen, I knew Brett was in Christie administration too until the governor fired him too. So we're kindred spirits.
What was his role in the?
He was the commissioner of education.
Okay.
Because he was the. He was the face of vouchers in Jersey City. I mean, that was his topic. That was his thing. And he's a smart guy. But Brett had his issues, and that was meaning that he liked to talk about.
Right.
And in terms of expanding on the other stuff, I don't know what fights he was at the time willing to have because of what was so important to him. I feel like Jack Ciattarelli has a big brush, and he wants to tackle everything.
Right.
And I think he will do it in a methodical, smart, and measured way, and in a way that he understands. That's the other thing. Jack Ciattarelli understands the power of compromise. You can't go into this job thinking you're just going to be a Republican.
Right.
Because you know what? You've got to, first of all, he's going to have a Democratic-controlled legislature if we don't all get out to vote and support these legislative candidates. And that's why we need to give Jack the majority. Right. But at the end of the day, that's a tall task. Jack needs to be able to work with the other side. And that is, to Christie's credit, that's what he was able to do. You've got to meet them. You don't give them everything.
Right, but you can meet them halfway.
Correct.
Right? I mean, that's the nature of politics. You have to compromise.
Absolutely.
I mean, and politics used to be, it used to be easy to compromise. Right. Or, I mean, it used to be the norm, right?
Absolutely.
People would work together. You got, Republicans and Democrats who were very different when it came to their ideas, but then we're still friends, right?
Right. Well, Tip O'Neill used to take them out for drinks after.
Yeah. But I think with the climate these days, everyone is so polarized.
Correct.
You're either a Republican or you're a Democrat, and if you're not one or the other, you usually hate the other side.
Right.
So it's
divisive.
Sad.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's very divisive, and unfortunately, when it's divisive, you get nothing done,
Mm-hmm.
and what you get done doesn't make a difference in
Right.
people's lives, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Okay. Oh, all right. So now back to the whole the Christie thing. So you met Christie during that breakfast, and then that's when you started to know, or that's when you started to know him better, like on a regular basis.
Yeah. At the time, Bob Uden was the chairman here in Bergen County, and they needed somebody to kind of rally the troops in Bergen. I was a cheerleader in high school,
Right.
so and I was motivated, and I had the time, but I knew how important this was, and so Christie, realized the importance of Bergen, and they, basically said, "Come on board, volunteer, but we need someone to be, our Bergen point person."
Right.
And I was like, "Sign me up."
So
This
while
is
you were
great.
still working for Dave Russo, you also became like the point person for the Christie campaign.
So in the evenings,
Right.
I mean, it was really kind of funny. In the evenings, I'd come down here with the kids, and my kids were young enough that they didn't have the nighttime sports.
Right.
It was just on Saturday mornings or whatever. So what I know now to be, lacrosse games till 9 o'clock at night, then it was, we're going to BCRO, you're going to do your homework,
Right.
you're getting Burger King tonight.
Right.
And it was just how it was. My ex-husband's a golf professional, so his hours were long. So the kids remember this time fondly. And when we get to it, it's part of why they were on board for me to do this.
Yeah.
So, they joke like, did they paint the place yet? Like stuff like that. But, this was home for us.
Right.
And so it was a second home. So so I volunteered, and I think that the gubernatorial candidate in 2005 lost by 40,000 votes in Bergen. And then in 2009, Chris Christie only lost by 5.
Okay.
Now, that also creates a little bit of a conflict to the argument that you have to win Bergen to win the state.
Right.
And the answer is you should, but you don't have to.
Right.
Because if you can pick up in places like Monmouth and Ocean, Burlington,
Right.
But Burlington now has gone Democratic. So you've just got to, again, it's a numbers game,
Right.
but we were able to cut that number down great.
And obviously, if you did well in Bergen, it makes up for some of the loss
Correct.
in the other counties, right?
Essex and places where you're never going to win. Yeah. So that was an exciting time, and so then I was asked to take on one role with the party actually, and then that kind of fell by the wayside for a number of reasons.
Which role were you asked to take for the party?
I was asked to serve as the executive director of the
NJGLP?
state party,
Okay.
and for a whole host of reasons, it was not going to be a good situation. So the day of the inauguration, Bill Stepien called and he said, "Meet me outstairs." I went down to the inauguration, and then I was going to the inaugural ball or
Right.
whatever. And he said, "Meet me on the stairs out in front of the War Memorial."
Okay.
And so I did. And he's like, "Listen, I spoke to the gov, and we want you to come in-house in the State House. We
Right.
think that's such a good fit for you, and we want you to be in intergovernmental affairs to work with the legislature. That's what you know.
Right.
We want someone who..."
That's what you've been doing for 16 years.
Correct,
Yeah.
and I know everybody.
Right.
So they're like, we want someone that is the face of the governor's office working with the legislature. Now, for me, I've worked in the legislature. We've never had a point person in the governor's office.
Right.
So
this was a brand new role.
Brand new
Right.
role, and I thought, this is brilliant, and this is exactly what
Right.
I would love to do.
Yeah, it's funny because you said that when you worked for Russo, you were thinking to yourself, wow, this is a dream job. Now this was a dream job, right?
It only got better,
Right.
And until it got worse.
Yeah.
But so I went down there. So we were starting the process of separating, and my aunt was retiring as a teacher, and she said, "Listen, this is a job that you really can't say no to."
This was in 2009?
It was January of 10 that I
Okay,
went
okay,
down
10,
there. Yeah.
right.
So because he's inaugurated like the 21st,
Yeah.
I started on the 24th.
Okay.
So, I talked to Dave Russo. He's like, "Go for it." He's like, "I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
This is amazing." And I was like, "Wow, I'm going to drive to Trenton every day
Right, yeah.
from Bergen County."
Yep.
So Aunt Pat said, "I'm going to help you with the kids. You got to go do this." It was a pay increase, obviously,
Right.
but also and to cover the commuting costs were
Right.
ridiculous, and the gas costs.
But
So
more importantly, it's an increase in responsibility and in your visibility. I mean, it's a
to
all
me,
around.
yeah, and
great-
I'm a behind the scenes person,
Yeah.
but for me, to make use of my 16 years with Dave and the relationships that I built
Right.
over that time and the respect that I earned, it was a no-brainer. So I went down there, and slowly my role changed over time, and I went from Director of Legislative Relations to Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. So then I oversaw the entire operation, and my direct report was Bill Stepien, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was exciting. I got to see all the members of the legislature on session days. I could be on the floor.
Right.
I drove every day to a building that had the Golden Dome, and I got the chills. I built a team with Bill Stepien, and we, every time we talked to young people that wanted to be involved in government and politics, we said to them, if you don't get the chills when you drive up here,
Right.
you probably need to leave. And we also would say to them, you're going to be working for the most popular governor in the state of New Jersey, in the country,
Right.
and the most powerful. There's two, he literally has the most power as a governor. So we used to say that all the time because we knew how fortunate we were to work, let alone for him, but for also in the State House, in the state of New Jersey. So fast forward, Chris Christie is going to run for re-election.
This is now in
2013.
2013, okay.
And he needs somebody to manage his campaign again. And so Bill was in the role of Deputy Chief of Staff, and the governor asked Bill to go over to the campaign, and then I was asked to go over and go up or go
Right.
downstairs, I guess, to become the Deputy Chief of
Right.
Staff. And I would tell you that was my dream job.
Okay.
And if that could have all panned out well, and I could have done that for 8 years, I think I would have felt so personally fulfilled, professionally.
Right.
And so I started to work. I received the title of Deputy Chief of Staff in May of 2013.
Okay.
And then it was
Can
over.
I ask you something?
Yeah.
For the viewers who might be curious, what's the difference between a deputy chief of staff and just a chief of staff?
Oh, a lot.
Yeah.
Probably 5% less calls from Chris Christie. No, I'm
Okay.
kidding. The chief of staff is really charged with everything,
Right.
the operation of everything. And at the time, it was a guy by the name of Kevin O'Dowd. But the deputy chiefs of staff basically had their own portfolio. Okay. So Bill Stepien, while everywhere, and had, Bill, because the governor trusted him so well, and because Bill was as good as he was at his job, or at his job, Bill would be involved with scheduling and whatnot. But his primary role was intergovernmental affairs.
Okay.
And, conversations with various community groups and whatnot, and the town halls. Chris Christie was famous for the town halls. So that was our office that did all that. So the deputies were charged, they each had a different portfolio.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, someone once told me, I'm not sure how true this is, but they said that, if you're in government, if you're like a, elected official, you don't want to make your best friend your chief of staff, you want to make them your deputy chief of staff. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, in my experience, which is limited, I found that Chris Christie, he did a very good job of surrounding himself with former U.S. attorneys.
Okay.
People that worked for him in the U.S. Attorney's office. Bill Stepien had a degree from Rutgers and was not a U.S. attorney.
Right.
But I would say, and that's why this whole thing was so surprising, what happened to Bill and I, was that I think he trusted Bill probably more than most people that he trusted. So I think he surrounded himself in a different way.
Okay.
I do believe that his first chief of staff, Rich Bagger, who was in the legislature, was in the assembly, and then was a senator for a short time, probably one of the smartest men I've ever met, and one of the most decent and kind. He was the governor's first chief of staff, and I credit him with the governor's success early on, because he was just spectacular.
Right.
He was spectacular. So I'd never heard that before, and that might be true.
Yeah.
Or you surround yourself with U.S. attorneys.
Right, yeah, maybe. Right. Well, that might get you in trouble, right?
Yeah, or not.
Yeah.
Or keeps you out of trouble.
Right. Okay, so now you're Deputy Chief of Staff for Chris Christie.
I am, yes.
And everything's going well. Everything's going awesome. Your dream job. It seems funny. Every job you get seems to be your dream job.
So what it is, honestly, is that I feel like I earned everything I got.
Of course.
And I worked hard.
Yeah.
And I also had a really good reputation, and people liked me on both sides of the aisle. And genuinely knew that I liked to get things done. I was not a show horse. I was not the type of person that had to get my picture taken.
Right.
I was not a self-promoter. This was, to me, about Chris Christie and where Bridget Kelly could serve best. And so whatever that role was and however he saw so, that's what I would do. And so as long as my kids were on board and as long as my family was on board to help, I had no dreams of going to Washington, D.C.
Right.
I know he had a whole trainload of people that wanted to go to Washington, D.C. if he was going to run for president. My divorce agreement doesn't let me leave.
Oh, really?
Okay. Joe and I have an agreement that
Right.
we can't move more than 15 miles from where our youngest goes to school. And that we did that just because he's a golf pro.
Right.
Like, he could pick up and go anywhere. And I was working for somebody who was pretty popular.
Right.
So in order to keep our family intact, and we were very amicable, that was healthy for our family. So people used to say, oh, Bridget wants to go to Washington. I'm not going to Washington. I can't go to Washington.
Right, you legally can't.
I
right?
can't. I'm bound. I'm bound to Bergen County.
Yeah.
So, which is fine.
For better or worse, right? Well, for better.
It's for better. It's
Right,
where my kids are. So, and it's where I've raised my kids, and they're fabulous. But so, they've all been dream jobs because for me, I feel like I've done my very best when I do them.
Okay, so now I'm gonna ask might be an uncomfortable question, but I know it's a question that everyone kind of wants to know about, right?
Sure.
So I know that in the last few years you've been known for Bridgegate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most people know you from Bridgegate. Mm-hmm. But for those people that just hear Bridgegate, they don't know what was behind it, right?
Right.
Can you just tell us, like, how did that whole thing start, and what was that all about?
How long do you have? The answer is it's a long answer.
Right.
And unfortunately, I'm probably not the person to ask what was behind it.
Right.
Because to this day, I don't know.
Okay.
I will say that there was clearly, we all use the words, and I'm sure it's in every business, that's above my pay grade. We were all state government employees, so the pay grade didn't fluctuate much, but there was definitely an inner circle that knew a lot more than me, that escaped the experience that I had post Bridgegate. So my understanding was from David Wildstein, who was later indicted and convicted and whatnot. He's no longer anymore, but that's for another time. David Wildstein had told me that now it's an election year, right? Mm-hmm. So the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is the political arm of the governor's office.
Right.
And good or bad, it's been that way for years. And the way it's set up is that the governor of New Jersey gets to choose the chairman. Mm-hmm. The governor of New York gets to choose the executive director. And the governor of New Jersey gets to pick the deputy executive director. So essentially...
Okay, there's 3 spots, right?
3 of, the key, big important spots. Then there are commissioner roles, and those are appointed and it's divvied up, whatever it is. But the chairman role and the deputy executive director role at the time was, people that were close to the governor or people that the governor knew would be loyal.
Yeah. And those roles are they're high-paying jobs, right? They're pretty high-paying.
I didn't know if the chairman gets paid, but at the time it was David Sampson, who was later convicted and was arrested and was put on house arrest down in his house in South Carolina for another non-Bridgegate related issue. So that was one of the governor's closest confidants. So he was the chairman, and then the executive director was a guy by the name of Pat Foy, who Cuomo put in. And the deputy executive director was former Senator Bill Baroni. Okay. So Bill was there. Bill is very smart. Bill and I just went through, 7 years of hell together. Right. We didn't know each other prior to, other than to say hello, if that. So the Port Authority is the political arm. David Wildstein, who really isn't educated in anything other than political games, was at the Port Authority. And his job, I can't even remember the title, I made it up. And he had called me, and he went to high school with the governor. He was like one of the governor's close guys. he called me and he's like, listen, it's an election year. We're gonna do a study at the George Washington Bridge. He's like, did you realize that there's these lanes that are dedicated to only Fort Lee? There's 3 of them. And this was an agreement years ago, a gentleman's agreement.
Right.
And that this way the Fort Lee residents can just get on the bridge quickly. He's like, but I think that's ridiculous. He's like, and we at the Port Authority think that if we give commuters from Bergen County an additional couple of lanes, those commuters are going to be so happy with Chris Christie because he ended this sham that the Fort Lee has these 3 lanes. The amount of traffic, so Fort Lee provides 5% of the traffic. The rest of Bergen County, or that travel in the other 9 lanes, is 95% of the traffic.
So, I mean, was there like a designation that said these 3 lanes are only for Fort Lee people, or?
There are cones set up every morning at 4:45 a.m. that the good men and women of the Port Authority Police Department plop down and then remove every morning during the week.
Okay.
That was the lanes.
Okay.
So David said the Port Authority is going to do this traffic study, and at the end of it, we're going to, Governor Cuomo could stand with Chris Christie, bipartisan support, and look that we moved all these commuters over. So, you run it through the channels. David had said that he had already talked to folks in the governor's office about it. I mentioned it to my direct report, who's Kevin O'Dowd. I mentioned it to the governor. There's subsequent conversations, and it's basically let the Port Authority do what they're going to do. Nobody got alarmed. So fast forward, I send an email that gets misconstrued with 5 other conversations prior to, and so then there's 5 days of traffic during 9/11, and some bad text messages back and forth. That again, this is what I've tried to teach my children, and I'm sure that people out there know. Sometimes you send things and the reader knows what you're saying, but if someone else sees it...
They take it out of context. It can mean something completely different.
Correct. And unfortunately for me, out of context meant that I was later fired. I was later indicted, convicted, and then sentenced to prison twice, and then appealed twice and finally won May 8th of last year. So, a poorly written email, and then, working with people that definitely know the system better than me, kind of landed me in a really tough, difficult time.
So, I mean, okay, just to kind of sum it up. So David Wildstein contacts you. He says, we're going to do this study on the traffic lane closures. Like, he just wants you to run it by your boss and see that it's okay, and that's what you do, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really powerful title.
Right.
I didn't have any power.
Right.
So, the story that, led every news story was that Bridget Kelly closed down the George Washington Bridge. So let's, make this clear, I didn't close the bridge. I didn't have the power to do anything.
Right.
Lanes were realigned, but there was nothing closed. There was nothing that was closed down. Now, I've told this story as well. I wasn't allowed to pick out a menu for any event that the governor would go to at a Giants game, Devils game, concerts. I had to run a menu by the governor every single time. So the fact that anyone thinks that I had the power to shut down, realign, or do anything at the George Washington Bridge, the busiest bridge in the country, is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's ludicrous.
Yeah. So, again, it's like when I broke my pelvis. There's a reason for everything, and maybe that's
This ordeal started in 2013, 2014.
So the lane realignment was in 2013.
Okay.
Chris Christie fired me on January 9th, 2014, and then I was indicted. Well, the master report came out in March of 2014, which was the whitewash, $11 million of taxpayer money to say that I had a broken heart and I closed the lanes of the bridge because of that, and to say Chris Christie had nothing to do with it. Right. So that was March of 14. I was indicted May of 15, convicted in November of 16, sentenced in April of 17, appealed later that year, resentenced the next year, appealed again, and then went down to the Supreme Court January 14th of 2020, And on May 8th of 2020, they overturned my case unanimously.
And to be clear, we're talking about the U.S. The U.S. Supreme Court, right?
Yeah.
The same Supreme Court that would not take up any of President Trump's cases, but took up your case.
They did. It was kind of crazy.
Right. And I think we mentioned this, right? The statistic is actually kind of crazy. Like each year, the U.S. Supreme Court, they get offered to hear like around 10,000 cases.
They get 10,000 requests a year to have cases heard, and they take 75.
Yeah, they take 75 out of 10,000.
So
you can do the math.
My attorneys, my appeals attorneys that are in Washington, D.C., said to me, it will be harder to get your case heard than it will be to win.
And you got your case heard, and you won.
And I won.
Unanimously. 9-0, right? So 9-0, 9 of the judges, or all the judges, felt that you had nothing to do with this, that you were...
There was no criminal activity. And definitely there was Judge Kagan, definitely commented on. But, the other thing that people don't realize is that when the Supreme Court hears your case, they're not reading my testimony. They're reading only the government's case. Right. So you're an attorney.
Yeah.
They don't have Mike Critchley's, my criminal defense attorney's presentation. They don't have my witnesses. They don't have anything to do with Bridget Kelly. They're basing it on the prosecutor's case.
Right.
And basically the United States Supreme Court said, this case is stupid.
Right.
And, it was a waste of your time and energy. And, we are going to, overturn this, and she can go about her life. And.
So completely vindicated. Now, just a question though. So, were you notified of their result of their decision, like via your lawyer, or no. How did you hear about it?
So both those days that we found out, so the Supreme Court goes into recess in July, the first week in July. So when we found out in 2019 that they were taking the case, we were waiting all of June, and so there's no real set schedule where things come out. So it was like. It looked like it was happening Monday, Wednesday, Thursdays. So my girlfriends and my family knew, because, I was, in 2019, I was leaving for prison July 9th. So I needed to know in June, which obviously the court knew that I needed to know. But for me, when I found out would determine nothing other than how much longer I had with my kids. Right. So the weeks pass, and we finally get to the last day of the session. And so we know it's going to come out the next day, So my girlfriends and my mom and my aunt came over, and I think my son Connor was home from school, and Mary Kate was not, and maybe the other two were still in bed, the little two. But we have better cell service or reception in our kitchen. So Connor was sitting in the kitchen with his laptop. My girlfriends and my mom were in my family room. And we know that they're coming out at 9:30, so you're just hitting refresh. I'm in my pajamas. And at this point, Ron, there was so little hope because...
Like at this point, your back is against the wall, like literally. This is the last straw, right? I mean, this is the last... after the Supreme Court, there's no other, venue or, recourse that you can take to try to fix this problem.
The only other thing would have been to be pardoned and pursuing that option. So I had a date of reporting to prison for July 9th.
Of 2019?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Down in Alderson, West Virginia.
Okay.
So my ex-husband was going to move back in, and be there with the kids.
And your prison term would have been for how long?
13 months.
For 13 months, okay.
It was lessened from, I had originally was sentenced to 18 months.
Right.
So we're sitting there, and Connor all of a sudden says, we got it. And I'm sitting on the floor, and I said, Connor, is it in Latin? He's like, what? I'm like, is it in Latin? You never took Latin, because everything's in Latin.
Right, yeah.
Well, it was, but it said that they granted cert is what it's called. Right. So we were all like, oh my God. So then my DC attorney called, my New Jersey attorneys called, and we were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Yeah. It meant I wasn't going to prison.
It's a miracle.
It was a miracle. Right. And so then we put in the papers saying she's not coming July 9th. We need her to stay out. Can she stay out? I mean, you have to petition the judge, and the judge said yes. So then it was, now we have to find out the date we're going to be heard. So fast forward, we go down on January 14th of 2020.
To Washington, D.C., right?
Which was amazing.
Yeah.
And it was pre-pandemic. So I got down to D.C. the night before. I took the train down with my attorneys.
I mean, you've always loved D.C., but I bet that trip was probably your best trip ever, right?
It was nerve-wracking,
right.
But it was exciting. I got on the train. Chris Christie was on the train, which was just funny. And I didn't know where he was going.
Right.
And I found out the next day when he sat in front of me that he was coming to my case.
Oh, you guys were in the same carriage on the train?
He was one up.
Okay.
Yeah, but,
Right.
So we get down to D.C. and we walked into our hotel, and I could probably start to cry, but all my kids were there, my parents, my aunt, and the people I love most were all, there was probably 40 people in the lobby, and came in with my attorneys, and I shockingly started crying. Right. And, grabbed a drink and just, stood up and thanked everybody, and we sat there, and then we went out to dinner, 40 of us went out to dinner, and just to try to, whatever. And it was also nice because so many people hadn't seen each other since court. Yeah. They were getting to meet my boyfriend first. It was just wonderful. And my kids were there.
Yeah.
And my kids, and, a couple of them brought friends. So it was just, to me, if I could walk into that room every day, I think I could have a good day.
Right.
And so we went.
Up until now, that was probably the happiest day of your life, right?
With trepidation, yeah.
Right,
yeah. How about the happiest day during that time,
Yeah.
but also not lost on me was the honor and the privilege to be going to the Supreme Court, to have a good seat.
Right,
because it was about me.
Exactly.
And what's funny, Ron, is that the case is Kelly versus the United States of America. I have that blown up and hanging in my basement.
As you should. I mean,
I've given it as a gift to a lot of people.
You can sign it, autograph it, right?
But it to me was just so exciting. And so the next morning it was raining, and we went down and got there and got ushered in, and it was crazy. And then all of a sudden, they usher in my former boss and his wife right in front of me. And what do you do? But all the reporters were because they're watching where he's sitting and where I am, and that was it. And then they, but unlike the trial where I had to prep because I was going to testify, this was all Yakov Roth. This was all my appeals attorney. My criminal defense attorneys were there just to hold my hands. So it was kind of exciting in that sense that all my faith had to be in Yakov, and he got up there.
Did you make a statement?
Afterwards, I did, afterwards. Okay. Well, because there was so much press there.
Did Chris Christie say, did he give a speech or?
He did not. No, he left quietly.
Okay.
But
did he talk to you?
Oh gosh, no.
No.
As I said to one reporter, they said, "Oh, Chris Christie was there. How do you feel about that?" And I said, "I just," and I mean this. I hope he had a harder time seeing me than I did seeing him, because that was my day.
Yeah.
That's Kelly versus the United States of America, and so that was it. So then we leave. Well, I stayed another night, but. We leave.
So this was May?
No, this was June. January 14th.
January 14th, 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we stayed down another night, and then I got to see. There's a young girl who used to work for me or with me in Trenton, who works in D.C. now, and she knew I was down there, and she texted, and I hadn't seen her in years, and she was an intern, and I hired her the day before I lost my job, and she came to see me, and that hug was she's a special young woman, and it just made me so happy that she had the courage to come see me.
Right.
And that was it. We went back, and then hello, COVID.
Yeah. COVID.
And then it was, okay, when's this going to happen? And I was driving in Englewood Cliffs on May 8th to pick up something at a place called the Brownstone Pancake Factory. And, 9:30 in the morning. And the phone rings, and it's Connor, my son, who also told me the last time. He's like, Mom, we got it. I said, what? He's like, you won. It's over. I was like, is it in Latin? He's like, Mom. So then my attorneys, I called my D.C. attorney first. I said, Yakov. I said, Connor just called. He said we won. And he's like, I haven't even gone downstairs yet.
So your attorneys, they made your case in January, and then in May,
We
that
found
same
out.
year. You found out 5 months later. And it was the same son who told you, right?
Yeah. Yes. And you know, I called my DC attorney and I said, Yakov, I said, Connor just called and said we won unanimously. He's like, I don't even have my computer open yet. And he went downstairs and he called me back. He goes, it's real, it's over. And I was like, what? And then Mike Critchley called me, who's, you know, he's a criminal defense attorney. He's fabulous. And he was like, Bridget, oh my God, it's over, you know. So it was a glorious day. But, you know, you even get home and it's COVID.
Right, yeah.
So all my girlfriends are standing in the driveway and my parents and, you know, people aren't coming over because
in May, that was the thick of it. It was the thick of COVID season, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had reporters come into the house and you're standing there, you're sitting, you know, 20 feet away from them and whatnot, doing interviews and stuff, but it didn't matter. I mean, it was over and it was surreal. I was very numb, and almost wondering what's going to happen next because I felt like there's no way that this is how it ends. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was a wonderful thing, but it was COVID.
Right.
So, like, you couldn't have...
So when they announced their decision in May, did you have to go back down to D.C. or anything? No?
Nope. I called my pretrial officer, so I have someone that checks in with me, and I had to check in monthly with pretrial services. I said, can I get my passport back? She said, we'll put it in the mail. She said, there's certain people you're just happy things work out for. She's like, and I am so happy for you.
Right.
And it was just... I got my passport back. I was allowed to vote again. I hadn't voted in 7 years.
Yeah.
So much of it was not 7. I hadn't voted since spring of 2016. But just all surreal. But it was COVID, so it's sometimes I'm like, did that really happen? So.
Now, wow. So looking back on all this, the past 6-7 years, is there anything that you would have done different? If you could.
No, you know what? I would tell you I would do things differently if I knew what I knew now, I would have asked more questions when I was working.
Right.
But what I did in those last 6 or 7 years, I'm kind of proud of myself. I stood up to people who were bigger than me. I stood up to people who had a lot more power than me. But I also stood up for myself and I told the truth. And so, you know, there's nothing greater than being able to put your head on the pillow. You know, I might have anxiety and I might have stressors from what I've been through, but I know I did the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, not a lot of people can say that they've gone through what you've gone through and came out of that vindicated. Yeah. Stronger than ever.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Most important for my kids, you know, especially having 2 daughters.
Right.
But even for the boys. You know, I think it's important that they know.
This is a good life lesson for anybody, right?
Yeah.
Like when you think you're down, when the chips are down, when your back's against the wall, don't give up because you could win.
Well, and part of it, Ron, honestly.
And especially when you know that you've done nothing wrong, right?
Right.
I think that's the crux of it. You were faulted for something that you were not really privy to. I mean, you weren't a part of it. They blamed you. Right. And that's the moral of the story, right? And when you're right, you're right.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something, Ron. A big part of it too is that doing what is hard is always best. Yeah. And so they offered me a plea deal. Right. I could have pled guilty to something I didn't do just to make this go away. Right. But I could tell you right now, my criminal defense attorney wouldn't represent me if I went down there and lied. And I wasn't about to tell my kids, we're just going to, you know what, I'm just going to plead guilty to something. Don't worry, I didn't do it, but like, that'll be easier. Right. That's not what you do. Yeah. So for me, so much of it and on the daily, you know, I think of my 4 kids and every step I did with this was about how I want them to live their lives. And so, listen, parenting is the hardest job in the world. Yeah. You know, and you're finding that out. Now they don't sleep.
Yeah, I got a 10-month-old, I mean, I think it's hard now, but it's probably it might get easier, right?
Little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. Yeah. But, you know, you know what it is? With a 10-month-old, you have a lot less to explain. Yeah. You know, if my babies were that young, I wouldn't really have to explain myself, and I wouldn't have to answer to anyone. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But I had kids that, you know what the problem is too, Ron? They have access to social media. Yeah. So how many times did I walk in looking at my kids, looking up YouTube and reading articles or watching interviews I did, and me not giving them the context of any of it.
Right.
So, you know what, for me, just life lessons.
Do you sort of harbor any, like, I don't want to say hatred, but anger or animosity towards Christie?
I'm really disappointed in him. Yeah. I don't want to hate anyone. I teach my kids that hate's a very bad word from the time they were little. I don't hate him. I'm disappointed. I would love to, I don't even know if I want to know anymore. I'm hurt by a lot of the things he said about me. I'm hurt that I thought that I was a bigger part of his team than walking away as he did. And I think about, again, what real leaders do. And I don't know that you abandon ship and promote yourself. I think you try to take care and try to make sure that those that are on the ship with you don't sink. And I was drowning.
And any chance you think in the future you guys might reconcile?
No. What for what? I don't think he's going to want the Bergen County Clerk's endorsement in the future. But
well, what if he comes and endorses you?
He would never. So it's not even. It's not even.
Right.
It's not even.
Okay.
Jack Ciattarelli is going to be our next governor. I think we all need to start talking about the future. You know.
Okay, so sorry, just a few more questions and we're done.
Right.
But it's just this has been so fascinating to talk to.
Thank you.
To the source and about that huge thing that happened. So, but just to clear it up, when people read Bridgegate itself has nothing to do with Bridget, right? Because I know that's people might get confused.
It's they name all scandals, right? There was Pizzagate, there's Watergate.
Yeah.
Bridgegate is because of the George Washington Bridge.
But it just so happens their name is Bridget, and then I know people might be like, oh, that's Bridget from Bridgegate, but it's.
I mean, it's a cute, fun party trick, but it's
Yeah. Okay. So May of last year, you were vindicated. You fast forward 1 year, almost 1 year. Next month is May. And now you're running for Bergen County Clerk.
I am.
So how did you go from that to this? Like, what was the evolution?
It's funny. I almost don't know. This is home. I mean, it's home, and I get still, I don't get the chills like I do when I see a Golden Dome, but walking back in here was like coming back home. It was really kind of thinking about what's next.
Right.
The chairman came to me and, we sat down. He's like, I just want to talk to you about something. He's like, and Chairman Zisa has been such a good friend to me throughout everything. A lot of people walked out on me and I didn't hear from them.
Right.
Chairman Zisa and the late Tommy Toscano would call me weekly to try to get me to just at least come see them for a cup of coffee. And I was going through some bad times, some really hard days, and not able to get out of bed every day, and I'd wake up to messages and whatever. But Chairman Zisa called and he said, I've got a proposition. He's like, you might say, absolutely not.
Right.
What are you thinking? He said, would you ever consider running for Bergen County Clerk? I said, what are you talking about? I go, Nobody is going to want Bridget Kelly back. I said, nobody. I said, you're willing to take that risk? He goes, that risk? He goes, I know what you're about. I know what you can do. And I think the job's perfect for you. So I said, oh, geez. All right. I got to talk to my kids. So I told the kids. And
this was when? Can you give us like a time frame?
Like late fall, early December.
Okay.
And I talked to the kids and they were like, why wouldn't you? To them, there was no...
Right, this was like a natural next step, right?
It was for them, I've never wanted to run for office.
Right.
For me...
Never? You've never had this desire to run? Even when you worked in Trenton?
No, absolutely, no.
Okay.
Whenever I worked, it was about the person I worked for. And Dave Russo, his rule was, that wasn't always followed, but his rule was, I'm the only elected official in the office.
Right.
You can't have someone with their own agenda
Right,
in your office. You just can't.
Right.
So I always like to, plan everything, make sure that people are, communicating and whatever. But running for office was never my thing. So I said to the kids, their biggest fear was, Mom, do you want to be, we've already done Bridgegate, and you hated being on TV. You hated the cameras. You hated pictures. That's going to happen again.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but I said, I truly believe in this role, what I love to do is what I'll be able to do. And it's not that there's not issues that are divisive to the party that I don't want to talk about. This role to me is what I'm made to do.
Right.
It's total customer service.
Right.
It's complete making sure that when somebody comes to the clerk's office with an issue, that either they need something or need something resolved, it's my job to find that solution and find out who's going to get them that answer.
Okay, so then very quickly, what does the county clerk do for the viewers that are watching?
So the county clerk oversees the elections, oversees the election process. The county clerk issues passports and does a lot of the forms and recording. So it really is like, the county clerk is like the chief record keeper,
right,
in the county. And in my eyes, I think, and I've talked to Simone, who's running for surrogate, I think those offices need to work in tandem. We need to make sure that people that have passed away are not still registered to vote, right, or still on the rolls. So I think there needs to be a lot more communication between the offices. I think that we also need efficiency. I think we also need to remember that we have senior citizens that aren't on the computer 24/7. So we have to have people in the clerk's office all the time to help our residents of Bergen County who are not computer savvy.
Yeah, because I know that my mom is not great with the computer. She would much rather, call in on the phone or go in person to have something dealt with.
Exactly
if she needs
right.
it. Yeah.
Exactly right. And I think we need to go into communities and register communities, no matter what community, to vote.
And I think especially after the last election, the 2020 race,
Sure.
I think a lot of people have issues with the voter integrity and the whole process. Yeah. So I think it's more important now, more than ever, that we have a county clerk's office that's accountable, right?
Yes, absolutely.
That people can trust.
Well, and I think that truly, that is there almost in a bipartisan manner, and not almost, is there in a bipartisan. I dare say, but all three of the constitutional offices are elected, and you have to run as a party. But this, to me, should really be a bipartisan office. Yeah, I mean,
because like you were saying,
or nonpartisan office.
Yeah, this is the office that deals with passports. Everybody has a passport, or most people do, right?
Correct.
Most people like to travel, right? So a passport.
Well, once we can again, but I think a lot of people actually, Ron, I think a lot of people are using this time to get passports so they can get on those planes as soon as we can travel.
Once the
restrictions,
restrictions are lifted and everything's back to normal, I'm sure a lot of people are gonna come to your office next year when you're clerk.
I can't wait to meet them.
And
So that's kind of where I see this. I see this role. I dare say that, when I win, that it would be my ultimate dream job because it's home. Right. It's not.
And it goes, it continues that theme of every job being your, dream job, right? Just on a bigger scale.
And how about this? I started my career in internships in Bergen County, working for Pat Schuber. And if this is the, my last best job, it's not a bad place to be. Or
maybe the beginning of a whole series of who knows, right?
One step at a time, one step at a time. But I'm excited, and I will tell you, coming back to Bergen County, our volunteers here and our party activists have welcomed me back with open arms. And I'll tell a quick story, and then, I don't want to keep you too long, but I walked in here for candidates night, I guess.
Right.
And I recognized a woman here that was one of my frequent dialers. And embarrassingly enough, because of the trauma of the last 6 or 7 years, I can't remember a lot of names. And it's 10 times worse with the masks.
Right, yeah.
So this woman comes up to me and she said, "I am so happy to see you." And I said, "Thank you." I said, and I was a nervous wreck coming here. It was really hard for me to come back. And she said, "I never got the chance to thank you." And I said, "I'm sorry." And and again, she's a mask on, so I don't.
Right, yeah.
She said, "You found me a job when I was out of work, when you first got down to Christie's office." She's like, "I still have the job." She said, "And I never saw you to thank you." She said, "But what you did changed my life." And I thought to myself, oh my God, like, A, someone remembered me, but B, this woman felt touched by something I did, and that's why I used to do what I did. I loved what I did, and so, if there's, I remember some people, one of the ladies here at BCRO their granddaughter got married. I remember when their granddaughter was born. So but it's over time, and so just to come back here is like coming back home. So it makes me so honored and proud to be the candidate.
Yeah, and I guess, when that lady came up to you and thanked you for helping her find that job.
I cried.
Yeah, I mean, it's very touching and beautiful to know that something that you did all those years ago is still having an effect on her today. I mean, she still has that job, right?
She does.
Yeah.
She does. And I had to search back in my memory bank as to what it was, and I remember now. And I remember her name now and all that kind of stuff. But it really just, it made me feel so happy to know that she remembered the Bridget Kelly from when I worked, as opposed to the Bridget Kelly that's been destroyed in the media.
Right. Well, I think part of the reason why it's so great and so beautiful that you're running for office now is that, now you have the chance to set the tone, right? It's your narrative, and you get to, get your side of the story out. Right. And I think you've been doing that, right?
Listen, the beauty of this is that I owe no one anything.
Right.
I'm not coming into this with any baggage of anything other than Bridgegate, which I can handle.
Right.
But I don't have, they all say who's the Godfather, who's this, who's that. I don't have any of that. Why? Because for so many years, any of those people that are considered godfathers, they didn't call me.
Right.
So right now, I'm Bridget Kelly, the candidate.
Yeah.
Fresh slate, and I'm so excited to run with you, with Tim, with Simone, and with Bob. I think it's going to be a great year, and I think we have, heading up our ticket, an incredible candidate for governor.
Right. Well, I mean, you alone you're the inspiration for like a lot of people to come out and vote and support us. So I think the fact that we have you on the ticket is a huge benefit to all of us too.
Thank you.
I think you're going to do a lot of great stuff for Bergen County.
I
mean, you have touched a lot of people.
Thank you.
In the past, and I think you're only destined to touch more.
Thank you.
To influence more people.
Thank you. That's my hope.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Bridget, for giving us your time, and it was great to sit down with you to actually get the backstory or the real story.
Yep.
On what the entire last 7 years was all about. But I do feel that life is like a pendulum, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a yin and there's a yang. So I mean, the last 7 years you kind of got kicked around, right?
Yep.
And now is your time to shine. So for the next 7 years, everybody better be careful because Bridget's back in full force.
Thank you. As I said the night that at candidates night, I'm like, I'm back. Yeah. So.
All right. Thank you, Bridget. Once you become county clerk, I hope you can come back on our show.
I would love to.
Once I become, county commissioner.
We'll do it together.
Yeah, we could do it together. Yeah, for all of you that don't know, I'm running for county commissioner with Bridget Kelly. We're going to be on the same slate. It's going to be you as county clerk, Bob Kugler as county sheriff, Simone as county surrogate, Tim Walsh as county commissioner too. So the 5 of us, I like to say, we make up the Bergen County Dream Team.
We do,
right?
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, Bridget, for everything.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be in touch soon, okay?
Awesome, thank you.
All right, bye guys.
Bye.